Alright, this video has to do, or will be the narration of the SOL Review PowerPoint on Standards 5 and 6, having to deal with ancient Greece and ancient Rome. This is material that we covered in the second quarter of the year. You can always go through this PowerPoint on your own. It's also located on Fusion. Remember, you can always pause, rewind, or replay parts of a video. Alright, identifying all of the following locations: the Balkan Peninsula, the Peloponnesus Peninsula, obviously the Mediterranean Sea to the south, the Aegean Sea between Greece and Anatolia, the Dardanelles Strait is the one closest to the Aegean Sea, Sparta is on the Peloponnesus, Athens is up a little higher on the Balkans, Troy is on Anatolia, there's Macedonia, and then Anatolia, also sometimes known as Asia Minor. What affected the topography of Greece upon the civilization? It was mountainous. And what that means is it caused the land to be divided into regions, independent, isolated city-states. Remember, we cannot grow crops up on high mountains. They don't grow very well on the side of mountains. So we developed in city-states, in these small places where we could farm. Limited arable land. This also led to the Greeks having to establish colonies to send their excess people out to find other places where they could farm and survive. While arable land was scarce, the mild climate allowed Greece to successfully grow grapes, grains, olives, warm weather type food. The mild climate allowed Greek city-states to be constructed in a manner that promoted outside civic and commercial events. As trade increased within the Greek city-states, they shifted from a barter economy to a money economy, so coined money. Identify the following. Greek religion is known as Greek mythology. It is polytheistic, and its purpose was to explain natural phenomenon, human qualities, and life events. So things that they could not explain were explained by their gods and those gods' powers. Zeus hurling lightning bolts, Poseidon making the sea boil. The king of the gods was Zeus. The god of music, knowledge, and the sun god was known as Apollo. The goddess of wisdom was Athena. Hera was the queen of the gods. The goddess of hunting and wild animals was known as Artemis, and Aphrodite was the goddess of love and beauty. Now, in ancient Greece, we had a couple of different forms of governments. Ruled by many, also known as a popular assembly of citizens, was known as a democracy. Ruled by a select few, an oligarchy. Ruled by one, and when it was determined by hereditary succession, would be a monarchy, that succession being known as a dynasty. Ruled by one, when it's taken by force or through appealing to the poor, is usually a tyranny or a tyrant. And then ruled by an elite few, so an aristocracy. That's like an oligarchy, but it is usually only made up of nobles or elites. The stages of evolution of Athenian government is it started as a monarchy, eventually the king died and it became an aristocracy. Then we had a series of tyrants, Draco, Solon, Cleisthenes, who used their power for actual good things to reform Athenian government, which led us to our first democracy. A Greek city-state is also known as a polis. The three social groups of most Greek polis are citizens, free peoples, women and foreigners, who had no political rights, and slaves. True or false, civic decisions were made in open debate and men were expected to participate in public life. This is true. Match the following individuals to their reform contribution for Athens. Alright. Draco wrote our first written law code. Cleisthenes is the father of Athenian democracy, and Solon allows public debate of all citizens. Now, these guys were tyrants when they ruled, but they used their power to create what becomes Athenian democracy. The Greek city-state characterized by the following: an oligarchy with a strict social structure, a militaristic society, is known as Sparta. What factor contributed the most towards the Greek victory in the Persian Wars? It was an alliance of Greek city-states. You're going to have Athens and Sparta ally together to fight against the Persians. The following battles: the initial Greek victory in 490 BCE was Marathon. The decisive Greek naval victory which ended the war was Salamis. The results of the Persian Wars were the preservation of Greek independence, continued innovations in culture and government, and eventually leading to the Athenian Golden Age. The Persian Wars are one of those turning points in Western civilization. The Athenian Golden Age, where we get all of our philosophers, the real true democracy, hasn't happened yet. If the Persians conquer Greece, it's entirely possible that it won't. Which Athenian leader emerged during the Golden Age to rebuild Athens and extend democracy? This is Pericles. Under Pericles, who had a voice in government affairs? Free adult males. The following structure constructed during the age of Pericles, that is the Parthenon. And after the Persian Wars, Athens is going to emerge as the head of the Delian League. And the Peloponnesian War is eventually going to be fought between Athens and its Delian League, and what had been Athens' ally becomes their rival, Sparta and the Peloponnesian League. The primary cause of the Peloponnesian War was competition for control of the Greek world. Athens had asserted control, and the Spartans didn't think that they should have. The effects of the Peloponnesian War were cultural development was halted, Greece was no longer united, and Greece is eventually going to become vulnerable to invasion by Macedonians. A couple of philosophers you need to know. Socrates developed the method of teaching by asking questions. He died from drinking hemlock. Plato is the author of the Republic, ruled by wise and ethical philosopher kings, and Aristotle laid the foundations of Western philosophy, studying science, politics, poetry, etc. Socrates was first, Plato was one of his students. Aristotle was one of Plato's students. The easiest way to remember these guys is, in the order they came, is Spa. A couple of other individuals. Author of Drama and Tragedy, The Persians and the Orestia, is Aeschylus. Another drama guy doing Oedipus Rex and Antigone is Sophocles. The father of history is Herodotus. The father of scientific history is known as Thucydides. Who is accredited with creating the epic poems The Iliad and the Odyssey? And that is Homer. Remember, the Iliad is the story of the Trojan War, and the Odyssey is the story of Odysseus' return home from the Trojan War. And then the following sculptures down there are created by Phidias, massive gold sculptures. And then we've got three types of columns: Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian. DIC in order from least elegant to most elegant. A couple more individuals. The father of Western medicine is Hippocrates. The father of geometry is Euclid. This man developed a theorem in relationship between the sides of a right triangle with which to torture high school students with, and his name is Pythagoras. And then Archimedes masters the lever and the pulley. Now, Macedonia, guys, is located just to the north of Greece. And which Macedonian king was successful in conquering most of Greece? A lot of you get this wrong. It is actually Philip II. Philip II's son is the one that you all remember. His name is Alexander the Great. He is successful in extending the empire and Greek culture. So Philip II conquers Greece, Alexander conquers Persia. Alexander's empire is going to extend towards Egypt in the south and almost all the way to India in the east. The primary language of Alexander the Great's empire was Greek, and then he's got some cultures that are going to merge with Greek culture to form what we know as Hellenistic culture: Persian, Indian, Egyptian, and Greek as well. And those are the standards from that. Moving on to standard 6, let's talk about Rome. A couple of bodies of water. The red over there is the Adriatic Sea. The green is the Tyrrhenian Sea. The blue is our Med. And And those mountains to the north are the Alps. What advantages did Rome's location within the Mediterranean basin provide? Well, Rome was distant from Eastern powers, so it got to develop on its own, separate from influence from the Persians and the Greeks. It did have a central location right smack dab in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea, which made it ideal for trade and cultural exchange. And the mountains and seas provide protection from invasion. It's very hard to move armies through those mountains or at this stage in time across large bodies of water. Early Roman religion is known as Roman mythology. That will change eventually. Its influence was Greek mythology. It's very similar. It is polytheistic, and again, its purpose, just like Greek mythology, is the explanation of natural phenomenon, human qualities, and life events. The Roman gods, Jupiter is the king of the gods. Venus is their goddess of beauty. Diana is the goddess of light and hunting. Juno is the queen of the gods. Apollo is our only Greek god who has the same name in the Roman pantheon. He is the sun god, and Minerva is the goddess of wisdom. Okay, these are all parallel to Greek gods, different names. Three social classes of early Roman society, of our Roman Republic, were patricians, plebeians, and slaves. Alright, the land-owning citizens are free land-owning citizens. The majority of the population were our plebeians, and our powerful rich nobility who controlled the government were our patricians. Remember, this is in the Roman Republic. This is from 450 or so to 0 BCE. True or false, slavery in ancient Rome was based upon race? This is false. Now, who was granted citizenship? Patricians, plebeians, selected foreigners were granted citizenship under the Roman Republic. Now, the rights and responsibilities of these citizens were voting. They had to vote. They had to provide military service. They had to pay taxes. Now, a couple of aspects of our Roman Republic. It was a government where elected individuals represented people, so we had a representative democracy. The Roman governing and deliberative body was known as the Roman Senate. Two of these people were elected each year. They were called consuls. They held veto power. They are similar to our presidents. The codified Roman law was known as the 12 Tables. The plebeians had their own legislative assembly, which was known as the Tribal Assembly or the Plebeian Council, and our elected plebeian representatives were known as tribunes. So this is the republican system of government that exists in Rome during the BC times. Looks a lot like our system here in the United States, a republic where we elect people to represent our wills, and we have multiple houses of Congress. Now, who fought in the Punic Wars? Punic Wars is Rome and Carthage. And the primary cause of this conflict was trade competition, specifically over Sicily. Remember, Carthage is located in North Africa, just across the Mediterranean. Now, there were a grand total of 3 different wars. As you can see, there is Carthage, there is Rome, Sicily was right in the middle. Now, the Second Punic War, a Carthaginian general was actually successful in invading Italy by crossing the Alps. He marched his elephants through Spain, through France, across the Alps and down into Italy, and this man is known as Hannibal Barca. Alright, and he sparked the Second Punic War. The eventual results of the wars with Carthage were going to be Carthage being destroyed after the Third Punic War. Rome is going to become an economic superpower of the Mediterranean, and it begins its conquest of Western Europe. So Rome consolidates control of the Mediterranean basin by conquering Carthage and begins to expand away from the basin and into Western Europe, where they're eventually going to conquer France, Spain, Britain, parts of Germany. The causes of the decline of the Roman Republic are the spread of slavery in the agricultural system. So we have small farms and farmers losing employment because we're going to have a large plantation system develop. Small farmers are not going to be able to compete with that system, which is going to lead to rising unemployment, social unrest, and then migrating to cities. So we've got cities full of poor, unemployed people. Not good. We have individuals seeking power with military support, which is going to lead to civil war. And lastly, we're going to have a devaluation of currency, which leads to inflation. Remember, devaluation of currency is when our currency loses more value. Usually the case would be that we have printed more money. In this case, case, it is because the Roman legions are so successful in conquering new territories that they bring in more money than the system can handle. Members of our first triumvirate of the Roman Civil War are Julius Caesar, Pompey the Great, and Crassus. Which Roman general conquered Gaul, defeated Pompey and the Senate in the Great Roman Civil War, and was eventually assassinated by members of the Senate? That is Julius Caesar. Now, if you remember, Caesar was assassinated on the Ides of March, so March 15th, 44 BCE. All right. Second members of the second triumvirate were Mark Antony, Marcus Lepidus, and Octavian. These men were actually appointed to that office. Now, who emerged from the civil war between Octavian and the alliance of Mark Antony and Cleopatra? Well, the answer to that question is Octavian. And Octavian, in 27 BCE, is going to be awarded the title of Augustus, essentially beginning the period known as the Roman Empire. And he becomes Caesar. Now, the 2 centuries of peace and prosperity established by Augustus are known as the Pax Romana, or the Roman peace. The economic impacts of the Roman peace, or the Pax Romana, were the uniform currency was created, which will expand and make trade more efficient. Safe roads and travel were built, so it promotes prosperity and stability. Social impacts were a renewed stability of the social classes. We no longer have the social infighting that led to the Roman Civil War. We have an increased emphasis on the importance of family. Political impacts were the creation of a civil service system to get more people jobs and working for the government, and we also have the development of a uniform rule of law. So the law becomes the same anywhere throughout the empire. As you can see here, the empire becomes very expansive. Now, the basis of Roman authority was going to be army and imperial authority during this time period. Causes of inflation in Rome were going to be a debasement of currency, which will lessen the value. Eastern luxuries are going to be purchased with gold, is going to change the treasuries. The high cost of military defense and conquest is going to be an issue, and then we're going to have a creation of counterfeit currency. Now, as Rome progresses, we've obviously passed the year 0, so we have this thing called the development of Christianity. The Christian faith is based upon the teachings of Jesus of Nazareth. Christianity has its roots in Judaism. It traces its founding back to Abraham, just like the Jews do. Jesus' agreement with God is known as the New Covenant. Major Christian beliefs include monotheistic religion, believing in one God, Jesus as the Son and incarnation of God, an eternal inheritance. They recognize all who believe, and that all men and women are created equal before God. Now, Christians were persecuted by Romans because their initial beliefs conflicted with the Roman gods, and they would not worship the emperor. Which Roman emperor used Christians as scapegoats for the fire on Rome? The answer to that is Nero. People who spread Christianity are known as apostles or missionaries. Christianity appealed to poor and to women. And people who died for their faith were known as martyrs. A couple of important people you need to know. The first bishop of Rome, the Pope, was Peter. Spreads Christianity to Gentile or non-Jews is Paul in all of his letters. Christian doctrine was affirmed and clarified by the Council of Nicaea and other Christian councils later on. And the holy text of Christianity is the New Testament, which combined with the Old Testament makes the Bible. Which Roman emperor provided religious tolerance towards Christians? That is Emperor Constantine. Which Roman emperor makes Christianity the official religion? Is Theodosius later on. The impact of Christianity upon the late Roman empires is the church is going to become a source of moral authority. Loyalty to the church becomes more important than loyalty to the emperor, and the church becomes a unifying force in Western Europe. Couple of important structures. That is the Colosseum. That is the Pantheon, not to be confused with the Parthenon. And that is the Roman Forum. And that is an aqueduct used to transfer water. Now, all of our Romance languages are eventually going to derive from Latin. Latin was the language of the Romans, and they are going to leave it behind. It blends with local dialects and gives us languages such as French and Spanish and Portuguese and Romanian. Now, which Roman contributed to the fields of astronomy and geography? And that is Ptolemy. The author of the Aeneid is Virgil. The Roman Empire demonstrated their emphasis on public health by the creation of public baths, public water systems, and medical schools. They had an emphasis on cleaning people. Cleaner people live longer. Couple of causes for the eventual decline of the Roman Empire: geographic size. It's too difficult to defend and administer. The cost of defense of such a large empire is going to lead to them to print more currency, so the devaluation of Roman currency. The military is going to have to start including non-Romans, mercenaries, to be able to stay large enough to survive, and this is going to lead to a decline in discipline and eventually defeats. Moral decay: there's a loss of faith in Rome and the family, and part of this is because they're placing it in the Christian church. We have political problems, civil conflict, weak administration, constant changing amongst the emperors, and eventually we're going to have attacks upon borders. Now, the Roman that's going to divide the emperor in half is Diocletian. And then in 476, Romulus Augustus is overthrown, which is the official end of the Western Roman Empire. Now, Constantine moved the imperial capital to Byzantium and renamed it after himself, Constantinople. And the Eastern Roman Empire is going to continue on as the Byzantine Empire. And that's going to be all for this standard.